Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Constellation by Story Archives. I'm your host, Mario Busto, alongside
The other host, Zachary Newton. Welcome back. It's been a good 20 minutes since I've seen you.
I know, right? We're just killing these. We just finished recording our Masters of the Air Part 6 pod breakdown, whatever you want to call it. And we are now going to be covering Constellation Episode 3. This show is a lot more confusing than Masters of the Air. However, I have news for the audience. I think I'm getting a grasp on what the hell's going on. I think I'm getting a bit of a grasp. Things are slowly coming together, albeit maybe Quantum Mario is helping this reality Mario. But we'll get into all the quantum craziness in this episode. Zach?
Yeah, it would be great.
Oh, we lost Zach.
Oh yeah, no, I was trying to give you the moment of the blank space with not me sitting here. I think I'm getting a grip on it as well. I'm very happy with the direction this is going in. I had mentioned in our last podcast on this show that I wanted to reserve the right to recommend the show until I saw this episode. And I would say at this point, I would recommend the show. It's definitely worth watching and getting into. And, I think where this is going is going to be a more palatable science fiction show than most. Like when you think of shows like Foundation, like it's super sci-fi. This feels more science than it does fiction, which I kind of like. I like that it seems like things are rooted in what sounds like some part of quantum theory. I mean, I don't know that much about quantum mechanics and science and this and all that, but I think Henry explained something pretty well in this episode where we're understanding that, hey, something can exist in, two different states at the same time. It doesn't make up its mind what it is until somebody looks at it. And
yeah, what are you talking about? We're the number one podcast for quantum physics breakdowns.
That's true. Yeah, we've covered the gamut on this, right? we got Oppenheimer. Well, we haven't covered Oppenheimer yet, but we love the movie. Great movie.
Yeah. Overall, it's becoming a little less cloudy. I think what really tied it together for me personally, not only Henry breaking down what quantum physics is, but that moment Joe has in this episode where she goes to the grave of Paul Lancaster and she has a vision of Paul standing in front of her, also looking at a grave, and he's on a cane and he looks like he's visiting somebody.
Yeah.
So perhaps in another reality, Paul's not dead. And that's the reason that latch, that's the person who was inside the ship who unlatched the thing. Somebody was in there, and maybe it was him, maybe it was somebody else. But someone from a different reality. What's happening is these realities are merging into one. And it's not happening all at once. It's not happening at the same time. It's happening in blips. Yeah. And that's why she's having these freakouts where she's going from rehabbing at Star City to in the middle of a freaking tundra in a cabin, to at home and spazzing out about the color of her car.
Yeah.
All these different versions.
Yeah.
Of Joe exist. I think right now we're seeing about two of her. I don't know if we're seeing more than that, but the common thread seems to be this hallway and the banging from the inside of the armoire with the little necklace on it. So, and everybody's kind of like, I don't know what's going on here or how the antimatter works, but it seems that it's not just it's not just people who come in direct contact with it, because at this point we can kind of see 4 people so far who are struggling with this, and it's Joe, it's Henry, it's Irina, and it's also Alice. For some reason, Alice is also experiencing this because she has that moment where she sees Wendy stomping on her rabbit, and that's when she says like those pretty much horrible things to her about her dad being dead.
Yeah.
So
I would also maybe throw Paul Lancaster into the mix there, though. We don't see his perspective, right? Yes. I think it's obvious that he sees Joe in a lot of the. I'm not going to call it a flashback because it's not a flashback. It's like I like what you called it, a blip, right? Like it clearly seems like he sees her in these blips as well. So definitely a few different people experiencing it. I was wondering as we were getting, as I was watching this episode, like, is it limited to just people that went to space? Because I mean, we know Henry, at least in one of the versions of himself, went to space. The other one's maybe a little iffy, but it's not. And I don't. Maybe it has to do with coming into contact with something. Like, is it like a virus? Like you catch this thing? I don't quite know yet. But damn, it's interesting.
The closest example I can think about that illustrates this in film is Interstellar.
Oh yeah.
When McConaughey's on the inside of the bookshelf, and he's pretty much, this is when he goes into the black hole. He's kind of drifting in there, and in it, there's this moment where he's behind the shelf that's in Murph's room, and he's there in the moment with Murph, and it's him, and she's telling him, "Don't go, don't go." And then he's like yelling at himself, "Murph, don't let me leave, Murph. Murph, don't let me leave." And he keeps pounding on the wall.
Yeah.
And in pounding on the wall, he knocks something off the shelf, which eventually goes to her eureka moment of figuring out how to save the planet. I think it was like to save the planet or save civilization. She found out that the bangs on the wall was like Morse code or something like that. And like in that example I'm giving right now, there was like that merging of McConaughey from that side of reality to this prior version of himself. But that's more time travel rather than quantum physics. But then again, maybe quantum physics gets into time travel in a way.
You fall outside of space and time. I have no idea. I don't know how to break that one down.
Yeah. Well, if you can break out of it, right? What is it like it kind of melts your brain a little bit when you think too hard about it. But like, yeah, if you get outside of like classical physics, I guess it would be conceivable. It's like that. I go back to Interstellar again when he puts the pencil through the paper or sort of thing, like in order to get out.
Yeah.
Of like to go into the wormhole.
Yeah.
I don't know, things like that, but it's definitely interesting, and I'm glad that this show is lending itself to conversation, because I think that's where our podcast kind of like really falls into a groove of talking about things we don't understand. So,
oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's fun to talk about things you don't understand, but it's always extra interesting to me, at the very least, when something feels a little more plausible, like when it's a little bit more on the science side than it is on the fiction side. Don't get me wrong, I love both sides, and I love a good fiction series. But man, like when I think about like Black Mirror as well, completely different vibe, completely different show, but I do like it because it does feel very plausible. Like, it kind of feels like a lot of stuff is rooted in science. Like, yeah, I could see that actually happening someday, or some version of this thing happening. So not saying we're gonna start seeing blips of ourselves or dead people. I hope not. But it's bizarre, but it's like a cool kind of bizarre.
I think what's happening in the show is that you have people like Henry and Irina, and that they reference their brother and sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
In doing that, I think that they understand that there's an existence of another version of themselves, right? And even at the end of this episode, when you have Bud talking to the doubter, I called him, the guy who kept on doubting the fact that he went to the moon, which that would be the most annoying thing in the world, is if you went to the moon and you had some douchebag telling you didn't,
Yeah.
And he blames everything on Henry Caldera, right? Yeah. But then again, there's a weird moment where in the interview, the interviewer calls him Henry.
Yeah.
So do they exist within the same plane? Are they in two different realities? You know what I mean? Like sometimes I think that they're in two different timelines, and then in other times I feel like they're in the same planet. Like, and perhaps Joe is right where she needs to find her daughter.
Yeah.
Because Alice keeps on saying in this episode, "What did you do with my mom? What did you do? Like, you're not my mom."
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps she does have another version of Joe that is her mom, and then Joe, the daughter she's looking for, that's her daughter. You get me? So like they have kind of crossed over, and now they are trying to find the proper one to put it back in line.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've got a good sense of like what the problem is, if you will, but the show
Hell
I
of a
think is
problem.
really going to push us more into like a, trying to get to the bottom of like why did it happen and how do we reverse it, which I'm totally down for. I think that would be an interesting reveal, and I'm okay waiting for that one. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on, right? Like the reality here is that I think both things you're saying or assuming are correct, right? Like they're both correct at the same time. It's, I don't know what is causing this thing to switch all of the sudden when, for example, Joe's looking at Alice or Alice is looking at Joe or Alice is looking under a
Mm.
truck at what seems to be her bunny or whatever. But um, I mean, nonetheless, it is changing. I wonder how many other people this is gonna, start happening to. Like, could this be something that I don't know? It's like you ripped open a void and it just keeps
Spreads.
spreading. Yeah, and then you start having everybody like losing their minds over it. Like, I don't know. Maybe
May
that would
I
be
say?
a little stressful.
May I provide a take for the audience?
Take it away.
If Henry understood that there was another version of himself and that he came into contact with this sort of antimatter thing, which has created this need for him to take these pills, right? Because we've only seen 4 people take these pills:
Yeah.
Henry, Bud, Irina, and now Joe. Don't you think it's a little unwise to do this experiment in the middle of the space station, surrounded by all these people? Like they're just openly doing this. It's not like a contained chamber where it's like quarantined in. No, they're just doing this out in the open in the main hallway. In space, I get it that it needs to be in space, but don't you think that this required at least its own module or its own bay?
I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks that they didn't really understand the effects of it or the severity of what could have happened. I mean, one would assume that, if you're doing a scientific experiment like this, like you would have weighed a lot of the options and known the risks. That's not clear if that's been the case. Like I will say, I mean, in all of episode 1 and 2, Henry has been the asshole that just doesn't give a crap about human life. Like he blatantly doesn't care. He cares about the scientific experiment. So I agree with you that it probably should have been like stuck out on an arm far away from everybody else in the
Mhm.
spaceship. But it's not Henry's way, I suppose.
I have a feeling they've all come in severe contact with radiation as well,
That's
because
what I thought the
Irina's
pills were
dying.
for.
I think possibly. Who knows? But Irina's dying of stage 4 of a stage 4 lymphoma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Henry has like these marks all over him that look like somebody who's been like exposed to something, right? Like on his head.
Yeah.
I'm not imagining that.
Yeah.
He has like these scars, scarring almost all over him. Yeah, you see his head. It almost looks
Yeah.
like really bad sunburn.
Yeah. It does look like that
Um,
sunburn.
and now Joe has to be on these pills. So it's almost like a poorly kept secret that all 3 of them have something in common. Um, but I don't know to what degree that experiment is the cause. And then you have this weird mystery of he's clearly observing that the antimatter exists and it's existing on Earth, right? And it's doing this thing, but it almost doesn't want to be observed. It doesn't want to be found. And so he puts the paper on the computer screen
Mm-hmm.
and he traces it, which it looks really creepy
Yeah.
when he does that. But only he can see it, which he calls the observer's effect. And I haven't looked into the observer's effect, but maybe you want to look it up.
I think
See if that's a
I
thing.
think it ties. I mean, I haven't looked up the observer's effect specifically, but I think it ties directly into what Henry was telling Alice about quantum physics, which ironically is one of my favorite lines in the episode, just because it seems so informative. He's talking about how, again, I mentioned it earlier, but things can exist in 2 different states at the same time, and they can bounce back and forth between both states at any point in time, but they never make up their mind what they really want to be until somebody looks at it. And I think that's the observer effect. That's at least my assumption. That's the way that I interpreted
This is the quick
this stuff.
definition I've been able to find on it.
Go for it.
The observer effect is the fact that observing a situation or phenomenon necessarily changes it. Observer effects are especially prominent in physics, where observation and uncertainty are fundamental aspects of modern quantum mechanics.
Huh.
And then an example of observer effect. In science, the observer effect refers to changes that the act of observing has on the phenomenon being observed. For example, trying to observe an electron will change the path of the electron. It's like it's mind melting trying to think about like the scenarios of what's going on, but only he can really see that the antimatter is definitely active on Earth, right? Because you have his condescending coworker Aaron, who's even condescending about his Nobel Peace Prize. Like he's like, I won one of those already. She's like, yeah, but like in 1981.
Yeah,
you're like, damn, like she's condescending as hell.
Oh yeah. We were talking about the pills a moment ago. There was a scene I didn't know if you caught, but I pulled it up right here. It's a minute 15:49 seconds into the episode, and you notice that there's actually like 4 different pill bottles that are being brought out by like this nurse. I believe that's for all 4 of the people that made it back to Earth, including Joe. So it might be a radiation thing, though. Man, the face on this nurse looks a little suspect after she's like handing these pills to everybody.
Maybe,
I'm like,
maybe hers are different.
Yeah, that's a possibility too.
She says it's folic acid, B12, and vitamin D.
Yeah, I call it bullshit.
Yeah. Let's talk about Joe being different. She's clearly in love with Magnus still.
Or now.
And Magnus is, you can tell, like, he's acting weird. Like, she tries to hold his hand, he pulls it back. Like, he's acting like somebody who's, like, not into her, at all. Or mad at her or whatever. And then you get this weird scene where Frederick caresses her cheek after the presser, or tries to caress her cheek. So you get the kind of idea that I think Frederick perhaps had an affair with Joanna, right?
Yeah.
And Magnus caught on to it, which is why he has that verbal kind of battle, or not verbal battle. Like he kind of like has a talking to with Frederick in the previous episode. He says, "Don't you freaking cry on me now." And this version of Joe doesn't seem to remember Frederick in that way.
No.
While he's saying like, "Get your act together,"
Yeah.
So the other version is probably the version of her that had an affair or had some sort of tryst with this guy, while this version only remembers herself like being in love with her husband.
Yeah.
And it's kind of horrible, because if the other one ever comes back to this version of her family, it's going to ruin Magnus again, because she's going to like not be close with him.
Oh yeah, not at all. I mean, there was a line between Joe and Magnus where I think Joe had said, "Do I seem crazy?" or something like that, and he's like, "Well,
different.
You seem to like me." So it's just like,
seem to like me now.
He seems so wounded. And Alice seems to just not be a huge fan of her mom. I mean, I feel like she still loves her mom. Like, I mean, you would kind of expect, but she always, every time I see her, she seems suspicious or just like not super happy with her mother.
Children and mothers have like almost like a spiritual, intuitive connection with each other.
I haven't gotten there yet.
No offense, I know you're I know your dad, but it's like it's a mom thing. It's a mom thing. It's a maternal. They carried the child in their belly for 9 months, so there's a different type of connection with a mom and a kid. And the fact that Alice just almost knows, like, something's not right with her from the beginning, like from when she's going into the MRI, she says she seems like she's dead. Like she's onto her from the very beginning. Like there's no fooling Alice on what's going on here.
Yeah.
The question is what happened to Alice, and why are there 2 versions of her? Or why is she now witnessing 2 versions of reality? What occurred there? Is it because she's like blood connected with her mother that now she's dealing with the effects of this, or what is it?
Could be. The other thing that I'm wondering, which I mean,
she was on the iPad call with her when everything went down. You think like it's possible?
Yeah. I have no idea. I do think that there is definitely 2 versions of Joe.
Yeah.
It sure feels like it, but I'm wondering, like, if what I think happened is what happened, which was, Joe, when she was at the graveyard, saw Paul saw her. It makes me wonder, who died in this other world on the spaceship, because it couldn't have been Paul in that other world. Otherwise, why would he be at a graveyard?
Well, I think it could possibly be that that she died. Who knows? I have no idea. I think it is almost certain that Irina is the body that crashed into the space station, though.
I think it's
because
certain as well, yeah.
Yeah, because like in the climax of this episode, when Bud takes the doubter outside, he has that moment where he's dancing with her and he sees the exact corpse face that Joe sees on the ship, and he doesn't know necessarily, but I'm assuming he's a pretty smart guy. He'll probably figure some connection, especially because Joe and him kind of share this handshake, and it's a strange sort of thing that happens when it does, because she didn't remember having met him before. So, like we're talking about, there's definitely a second version of her that's not currently here. So where she is probably in the other reality.
Yeah. I mean,
and that's why in that reality, the car is red.
Yeah. I mean, the color of the car is also incorrect according to Joe in this episode, but it's always been what it
Zach,
is.
What was the color of the car in the chase in episode 1 on the road?
Oh, gosh.
Can we go back to episode 1 and check that out?
Yeah, I'll have to look for it. Might need a little bit of
because we kind of get like this shining overhead shot of the car as it's driving on the road.
Yeah, let's pull it up.
And I'm interested to know.
That would have been the car that she's driving, yeah?
Yeah. I wonder if they were sneaky enough to hide the color of the car here, because it is nighttime.
I mean, it is really hard to see at night. I feel like we're just going to get a nice tight shot.
We got to let the screen overlay disappear.
Yeah, it's working on it. It's gone. We got the interior.
You took us straight to an interior shot of the car. This is a thing.
No. Yeah, I started on the outside. Let's see. Maybe she stops the car at some point here, I want to say. Let's give this a shot.
Take us to a place where the exterior... Yeah. But you got to reverse it 15 seconds so we can get rid of the overlay. Go back.
They're inside already. Everybody's going to be like, what the hell are these guys doing?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. They're in it with us. They're checking it out too. It looks blue to me.
So hard to see.
It's hard to see, but it looks blue to me.
Yeah, it looks like it
could be wrong. Zach didn't really pick the best choice, best choice of shot, guys. So if you see it,
look, I was gonna try and find the spot where Magnus was driving the car, because that was broad daylight.
Yeah. I only remember Magnus riding a bike with his daughter to the facility. I don't remember the car.
When they left, were they driving? I'm not sure. I'd have to look back for it.
In the van. But either way, it could be that reality of Joe has a red car, and that's why she's like, the car is blue? I don't remember the car being blue. You know?
Yeah.
So there's bits like that. That's when they're being driven around.
Yeah.
That's not in the
We don't see the car yet. Maybe we'll catch it during the day in one of the next episodes.
Yeah. Let's talk about Bud, because he makes a pretty big decision to push this guy off the railing, which I gotta say, that's gotta be the dumbest decision for that guy. Like, there's no way I'm standing next to the railing of the guy who just threatened to throw me off the ship. And by the way, that guy's dead. If you ever been on a cruise ship, like he's done. There's no way.
Nobody's even gonna know you fell off, especially when the guy that threw you off is on board.
Well, I think everybody's gonna assume that Bud threw him off. He literally went in there. He said, "I gotta talk to you. Let's take a walk," and he just pushed him off the railing. So, what's gonna happen with Bud here in this next episode? Is he gonna go to jail? Are we gonna figure out if these two realities are in the same world? All sorts of things are gonna play out in this next episode, which are gonna just take this show to the next level.
Well, I was going to say, it's totally plausible that Bud does go to jail, because Bud is both dancing with Irene and throwing a man off a ship at the same time in this episode. At least what appears to me to be the same time. There was no clear indication that these things or these events happen at different times. So, who knows?
I still am completely in the dark as to why Joe seems to be on the run at the start of this series. That is still a mystery to me.
Well, I feel like we might get a little bit more of the why she's on the run in the next episode. I mean, at least I do hope so. Like, I feel like we got a nice explanation of sort of what we're seeing. It helps us comprehend this blippy back and forth. But yeah, I'm at a loss to that as well. I mean, maybe. I mean, shit has to hit the fan at some point for her to be on the run. Maybe something happens with one version of Henry, and I don't know.
I'm not gonna lie. There's at times where it gets kind of heavy because it almost feels like she's an Alzheimer's patient. Like she has like heavy Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And then there's also this there's bit where she's trying to stick to her story that she saw the body. And then you got the whole committee who's trying to tell her, like, no, you didn't. You had a hypoxia or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You're full of crap. Everybody's trying to talk her down. And then at the end, she concedes, yeah, I didn't see it. Because she just at this point wants to go home.
Yeah.
And she's obviously listening to Henry, who came to her apartment and said, don't get caught in the grinder of this. Everybody has an agenda here, including NASA. Everybody wants their costs covered of what happened in losing the space station. So, by the way, Team Magnus, I hope that whatever happens here, that whole thing with Frederick is done for.
Yeah, that would be nice. I like Magnus. He seems like a nice guy so far.
Same.
I feel like we know enough to know what happened, but I could be proven wrong.
Looking forward, we have Alice, who doesn't think that that's her mom, and the mom doesn't think that that's her daughter, which I think they're both right. That's what we're going to find out. You have this whole situation with Henry, who's doing research, who sees patterns that nobody else can see. You've got Bud, who killed the author on the ship, who's probably going to go to jail or who knows what. We have the potential version of reality that Paul Lancaster is still alive. We got these mysterious Matrix pills, which, funny enough, I wrote a note. If you type pill on your keyboard, it's the same color pill as the emoji as the one in this show.
Oh, that's funny.
I don't know if Apple TV did that on purpose, because the pill emoji has always been that red and yellow, but is the exact
100%.
looking, like, that's kind of creepy.
I think it's I think that's exactly why. I think somebody was like, "Yo, there's an emoji for the pill. Let's design it after this."
You think?
Had to have been,
it is. What if quantum physics smashed into like the design of the emoji into this show, and then you know what I mean?
There's this funny thing on Instagram that I scroll across all the time. I don't know why, but it's this white guy, and he's like always making fun of people with the podcast, and he's like always talking about, let me go down this rabbit hole with me, like, let me talk about this thing. It's kind of funny. It's all these stupid ass ideas, but. If you want to think about something for a moment, I mean, is Apple trying to tell us something here? All of these
Maybe
science
Apple
fiction shows. I mean, come on, guys. This is the wealthiest company in the world. I'm sure they're doing some science, some freaky stuff, just experimenting and trying to learn some things. Maybe they're trying to drip some information to us in here with these shows, like Constellation. They figured it out.
You think eventually, like, the shows just merge into our reality, and we find out that we're a part of the shows?
We are Constellation. Reality. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. That'd be funny. Not really. It'd be terrifying.
Yeah, it would be pretty horrible. All right. Going forward here, we have this mysterious Frederick Joe affair. We have the antimatter lab experiment, which I'm just waiting for that freaking vial of antimatter to just explode in that lab. I don't know. I think I said, am I on the record of saying I saw this as like a very short 2-season show? I take that back completely.
Yeah.
This could go a completely different way than I was expecting it to.
Yeah.
By the way, great job by Jonathan Banks. It's sometimes hard to see a character who you fall in love with, in another show. For example, you see John Hamm and immediately it's just Don Draper.
Oh yeah.
And you see Bryan Cranston, it's just Walter White, Here it's, Mike Ehrmantraut, but he's really carrying it and doing a very good job. And I haven't watched a lot of shows or films with him since Breaking Bad. And I know he's been in a lot, but I just personally haven't watched him.
Same.
So good for him. By the way, Reno looks pretty good for an old lady, huh?
She does, and until we get the blip, and then she looks really freaking terrifying.
Yeah, but she ages like fine wine. I'm not gonna lie. Kind of like a Helen Mirren category. She's getting like to that sort of,
Yeah.
Why don't Henry and her just shack up? I mean, they both seem to be single. They both have like dual realities. Why not just like, You know what I mean? Like they might as well just shack up at this point.
I mean, who knows? Maybe it happens off camera or something. You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm assuming that she's not going to be in the next episode, maybe, or if she is, it'll be for a short period of time. I don't know how quickly she's supposed to die from this cancer.
Yeah. Well, did seem like there was a fire under her ass to make sure that body running into the space station was not proven correct. And I think it's because she probably has suspicion that she's the body. So I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Well,
all right. Let's get into some categories. I think it's still too early to do some wagers here, but I think by episode 4 or 5 we gotta lay down some wagers.
Yeah, it is a little too early. I think we're just starting to understand kind of what's going on. Took an extra episode this season, but
however, that might be the best time to lay the wagers. Like right now, if you were taking the opposite, which I don't know if you want to, I would say that there's 2 versions of Joe, and that Joe and Alice are both correct. That Alice is not her daughter and Joe's not her mother, and that they're like the other versions. They just crisscrossed.
I wouldn't take the opposite on that because I do agree with that. Though I would say I don't think they're permanently like crisscrossed. I do think that there's some elements of them bouncing back and forth because we saw that on the helicopter of the last episode, right? Alice was sitting in the helicopter, so was Joe, and for a moment they both just like disappeared from each other.
Yeah, I think that's when it happened, possibly.
At the very least, the first instance of it happening, but they did kind of like appear back. They popped back, which is interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of something that I would want to put money on just yet. Not just yet.
Are they existing within the same Earth? I would say, you think yes.
Well, all right, hold on. When you say the same Earth, what do you mean?
I mean, like, if you go to that cruise ship, it's in the same exact planet and timeline as where this Henry is. Like, Henry's in his house, like, hooking up with Irina.
Yes.
And Bud at the same time is throwing this guy off in the same planet. Like, he could, right now, Henry could travel there in a helicopter and land on that ship and see Bud. You think that? Because I'm going to say no.
That, I don't think it's that you could see yourself. I think it's how other things see you, if I understood that correctly. So, no, I don't think Henry could go fly a helicopter to the cruise ship and see himself there. Like, I don't think it's that blatantly obvious, right? Like, I think like both can be true. Like he could be here with Irene, and he could be, on the ship. But I mean, he's only ever wherever we see him, or where the world sees him.
Okay, so you think that he can only exist in one place at one time? That doesn't make any sense.
When somebody's looking at him.
That's so weird.
It's hard to explain. No, if anything, I would at the very least say like it's to me seems clear like there is no multiverse, right? And I kind of thought that's where you were going with the question. Like, I don't think there's like a completely different universe here. I just think everything that exists, I suppose, could be in 2 different states, and we're kind of just seeing an imbalance of things flipping back and forth between those 2 different states, unexpectedly. It's It's also weird, and I don't know how to interpret it, but Henry seeing Irene's body down here on Earth is very weird, considering it was just in a spaceship destroying it in like the last episode. So I'm not quite sure how to interpret that one, because I do believe it was
unless remember Bud's talking about his friends who died when he went to the moon. Unless she was one of the ones who died on that.
Oh, huh. That would be an interesting one.
And so they were both in love. They're both in love in both realities. And then when this guy, the author, says like, "You're a failure, you're a blah," the first person who comes to mind is the woman that he loved, and maybe that's the reason in Henry's reality he saw her as Bud sees her, or remembers her.
Interesting. So you're saying Irene and Bud, or Irene and Henry, whatever, were on the ship together, and then
maybe it's a theory.
Would you bet on that being the case. All right. Would you bet on Irene being one of Bud's crewmates that died?
I don't know how historically accurate this show is. I don't feel comfortable making that bet right now. Why? Because I'm leaning towards it. Like, I'm leaning towards that reality.
Okay. Because I'd take the opposite on it if you're leaning towards it.
All right. If we want to make this interesting, let's write that down as the first bet. I would say that he was on the same mission and she was one of the ones who died there. But then, but honestly, the opposite side is I don't expect that NASA did a joint mission with Russia to the moon when Bud went up there. So that's kind of tricky to me.
Yeah. I just don't know how historically accurate it is. I mean, I don't like even the situation we're in right now. I mean, just feels very science fiction-y to begin with.
All right, so in Bud's scenario, in this gamble or this wager, I'm saying Bud was with Irina in space when she died.
And okay, got it.
Cool. All right, let's get to the categories. Any other final thoughts before we do the categories?
No, honestly, it's a good sci-fi show. I'd take a look at it. Maybe I can get my wife into it. She saw the trailer and she's like, "This looks like a horror show in outer space." I'm like, "No, it's not going to be all in outer space." So
I cannot imagine her liking this show.
I mean, hey, she loved Silo.
Okay, maybe I didn't know that.
Yeah, that one we both watched. Foundation was a no-go. That one's just too over the top. If we remain on Earth for a little bit,
Silo still tops the ranks of all the shows on Apple TV. That and Severance,
best show I've seen. I would put Silo, I think, over Severance because too much of Severance puts me in a mood.
What kind of mood?
I don't know. It's just like ever so slightly depressing. Like, it's interesting, but it is kind of a depressing show.
That's how House of Cards made me feel. I felt like I had to take a shower every time I watched that show.
Yeah,
it just made me feel like grimy because these people had like no morals. I would put Drops of God near Pachinko, and Drops of God are like top tier Apple TV shows for me.
Okay.
By the way, Pachinko has to be coming out soon. Season 2.
Drops of God was the wine tasting thing, right?
Oh man,
no,
that might be I think that's probably the best show on Apple TV that nobody knows about. I'm not even kidding.
All right. Let's hop into some categories then. Let's start with favorite character of the episode.
I don't really have one. Like, I don't really have one, dude. Maybe Magnus. Maybe Magnus.
Really, Magnus? Interesting.
I don't have one. I'm just throwing a name out there.
I really like Joe. I mean, I still think she's the star. She's great. I will say though,
I really like the Russian guy, Ilya. I like that guy. Seems like a good dude.
I mean, Ilya's a badass.
But he doesn't really play a role in this episode.
No, I was gonna say I don't even remember him in this episode.
No, but I like him. He seems like a good dude.
He's cool. Yeah, he's got a great name. He's got
compared to the blonde chick. Like that blonde chick is annoying as hell.
Vodka and whatnot.
She's so annoying. The one who's always like,
the short haired girl.
Oh god, she's so annoying.
Yeah,
so annoying. We have families too. What did she tell Joe in this episode? She said another douchey comment this episode.
I don't even remember.
When they're walking in the graveyard, she says, you know how crazy that sounds? Or, oh, hold on. You know what the most unreliable form of testimony is? Eyewitness testimony. Okay.
Audrey Broston is her name in the show. Played by Carol Weyers or Wires.
She's doing a great job of being annoying.
All right. Well, that's kind of what I was going to get to next. It was an annoying character. I did not like Henry. Well, I didn't. I have not been a fan of Audrey in the show at all. But Henry was annoying the crap out of me in episodes 1 and 2. He still annoys me a bit in episode 3, but he is growing on me. And I'm gonna be honest. It's the side of him that's with Irene that's growing on me, at the very least in this episode. I like
the side of him
me to death.
Bud, Bud is a miserable old man.
Yeah.
But the side of him who's talking to Alice on the swing set, and the one who has that heart to heart with Joe at the door, that's the guy I like, but not this old curmudgeon version of him on the cruise ship.
He's just such an angry, bitter individual. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite scene of the episode?
Probably the final scene where he throws that guy off the ship. That's probably like the buildup is all the buildup's leading to that. The entire episode, pretty much.
Yeah. That's a good one. The wasn't it was am I incorrect? Maybe I'm blurring my episodes in the that house with Joe and Alice where there was two versions of Alice. Was that this episode or the last episode? I kind of think
that
it
was the last episode.
Yeah. That one was interesting. It was really creepy.
That was tripping me out. Yeah.
I kind of I'm
a
sucker. Yeah, that one was really weird. It was like I was like waiting for I don't know, just somebody to start crawling on the floor and gnawing at your knees or something.
Yeah, someone crawling off the TV set.
Yeah. I'm a sucker for just scenes and shows that explain things to me. I don't know why. So I would probably go with the Henry and Alice scene on the bench. I liked it. It's the one time that I liked his character. It's the first time that I think we got a decent explanation of what the hell's actually happening in the show.
I don't think I'd want my kid being told an explanation about quantum physics. I feel like it would just confuse the heck out of my child.
So what is God?
Yeah, pretty much. Just
yeah. I agree with you there. I don't quite understand it myself. Yeah. Favorite line of the episode? Go ahead.
Something definitely stood out to Henry though when he saw her playing hide and seek, because he used the example that quantum physics almost don't want to be found, almost like a game of hide and seek. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Do you
favorite line? Nothing stands out to me in this episode.
I already gave mine. It was Henry explaining the quantum physics things to Alice. So same scene, but again, good reveal. I liked it. It made me feel less lost in the show, and that's why I appreciated it.
All right. Well, I think that just about does it. Thank you all for tuning in. We are doing this show mainly because you guys requested it, and then we like the show now. It's past the Story Archives test, the 2 to 3 episode test. We hope you're enjoying our breakdowns of each episode, albeit probably it's confusing you more than when you first began the episode. But if you are enjoying it, make sure to like this video or rate the podcast 5 stars. I always just ask for 5 stars, because let's strive for the best, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to contact us with your crazy quantum physics theories, you can contact us at contact@soapbox.house. And tune into our other coverage of shows right now. We're doing Masters of the Air, which is getting incredibly good. I just finished the True Detective wrap-up solo series, where I dropped 2 episodes. I did the episode 1, and then I did episodes 2 through 6 because it's probably the best show I've watched this year so far. So check that out. If you haven't watched the show, do so. I highly recommend it. It is creepy as hell, so maybe you don't watch it right before bed, or if you do, make sure you have a palate cleanser of a different show to watch right after so you can sleep. And that's all I got.
All right. Beautiful. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Constellation by Story Archives. The episode titled Somewhere in Space Hangs My Heart. What a poetic name for an episode. You can find this podcast anywhere you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. You can visit us on YouTube at Soapbox Podcast Network. Visit our website at soapbox.house. Email us at contact@soapbox.house. And we do have a link in the description below for our quarterly newsletter.
Perfect. All right, guys. Until next time, stay in this reality.
Peace.
Peace.